Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running.
It's hard to believe that we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
So many great conversations over the years about so many great movies. All that said, producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes.
Becoming a Next Reel member gives you access to all sorts of additional and exclusive content. Plus, you're helping us keep the lights on. Just head to thenextreel.com/membership, where you can learn more about becoming a member, which costs a measly $5 a month, practically the same as one fancy coffee drink. And you get so much more.
Every month, we record a bonus episode exclusively for members. Those episodes cover movies from whatever series we're covering at the moment, or add to previous series.
Some movies we've covered that only members get to hear us discuss include The Blues Brothers,
The Russia House,
Naked Lunch,
Independence Day,
The Hot Rock,
and Relic, the better one. Plus, members get to vote on what we're going to discuss for those episodes.
We also record additional pre- and post-show content in regular episodes that only members get to hear.
Like conversations about similarly themed movies.
And answering listener questions from our live member chat.
Speaking of our live member chat, we record almost all of our episodes in Discord, where members can chat right along with us live.
Members get access to other members-only channels in our Discord community as well. On top of all that, members get all episodes a full week earlier than everyone else in a private Next Reel feed just for them that includes all the shows in the Next Reel family. The Next Reel, the Film Board,
movies we like, Sitting in the Dark, and more new projects on the way.
To top it all off, members don't have to listen to ads. We've already eliminated those annoying, dynamically inserted ads that, let's face it, we all hated.
We are listening to you.
We love podcasting for a living, and those ads help to pay the bills. Now, we're counting on you, dear listener.
We promise. We aren't going back to those terrible, dynamically inserted ads that don't relate to us at all. All we ask is that you consider supporting the Next Reel family of podcasts with a membership.
Again, it's $5 per month or $55 per year. Just head to thenextreel.com/membership.
thenextreel.com/membership. Get your access to early, ad-free episodes with bonus content, member bonus episodes, and access to member channels and live streams in Discord by signing up today. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to the Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Anna and the King is over, etc., etc., etc.
Your Majesty will forgive me. It's a matter of great importance. It's Lady Topton, Your Majesty.
Is there nothing dishonorable to me that is secret here?
Mary, how shall you like it if I make you watch what I shall do?
Was that as suitably like blackface racist as the film was?
Okay, this is going to be an
just
interesting one to talk about because definitely this film is wearing its age. And I don't know if that ever went away with any of the iterations of the story.
I don't know that it did.
All the way up until 1999 when Andy Tennant decided to make his own version.
Yeah, I mean, that's of all of the things that hit me about this movie, that's the one that sticks out as sort of a sore thumb because I have to say, I enjoy my time with this movie. I've always loved this story, and I've learned a lot about kind of the genesis of it. I'd never seen this version of it, and I'm a big fan of The King and I and Yul Brynner's, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is chef's kiss for the ages, and that colored my entire interpretation of Siam and Thailand, that they probably sing in sort of Victorian English all the time. I saw it just young enough that, man, it broke me for what Thailand actually is. Very different, but. I do really love the story. It's a sweet kind of romantic story, and so it's interesting to watch it and have that same feeling, that same like sharks versus jets feeling of they just didn't know how to do stuff. You know what I mean?
Well, are you saying The King and I didn't?
No, I'm saying they didn't. They absolutely didn't.
Yul Brynner wasn't wearing a fake tan.
No. I'm saying, when I say they, it's the royal they, all the way, as you say, through 2000 or 1999, whenever, like nobody had figured out how to approach this kind of content in a culturally sensitive way. And we learn stuff, right? Like over the years, we learn stuff. So as much as I feel like I'm softening my perspective on some of these antique views on filmmaking. And, so that part of it does not hold up. And, but I can still celebrate it for what is a lovely, ultimately to me, a lovely film with some interesting stuff going on.
Once you can get past the way that filmmaking was made at this point, I mean, even to the point, I mean, I don't think any version of this story that has been filmed, and I imagine stage versions as well, has ever really handled the casting and, I mean, really kind of just even telling the story in a way that is a little less problematic. But and then even in the 1999 version, it's like Chow Yun-fat is not Thai, and again, it's okay that they at least cast an Asian actor, but at the same time, they were kind of doing some cultural washing as well, just saying, you know what, he's Asian, he's good enough. And
exactly.
So it's
like considering bases covered, right? Like,
yeah,
Jodie Foster's not British.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting thing that they've always kind of struggled with, to the point where, I mean, this film has largely, or this story from the beginning, when the book was first written by Margaret Landon, adapting Anna Leonowen's own account of her time living in, at the time, Siam, now Thailand. Ever since the book has come out, the people of Thailand have generally disregarded it as a story that's full of all sorts of portraying the society incorrectly, and not necessarily being respectful of the king, of the country, of its people, and to the point where, I mean, several Thai intellectuals in 1948, after all of this came out, they actually wrote a book called The King of Siam Speaks that kind of talked a little bit about it. And, I think that largely the story was, dismissed over there. But for a lot of the rest of the world, it has still been a very popular story. And I guess, in the scope of this type of story, especially coming out at the time that it did, I mean, what is it about the story that draws people to it so much? Is it the sense of kind of like the world history and like we get this journey of Anna Leonowens as she's kind of exploring this part of the world and learning a little bit about herself along the way?
Well, sure, and the romance of the crusty old character who softens as a result of the relationship, and right, those are some, I don't know, romantic cultural tropes that I think we're sort of, to a Western eye, wired to find some affinity for. I mean, this is the stuff that romantic movies are made of, and so I think that's probably it. But to those critics' eyes, the Thai critics, the Siamese critics of the time, this was not made for them. This was made for the West, right? This was made for then British audiences, right? Like in the book in 1870 and the original books, I should say. I'm really curious about the English governess at the Siamese court and Romance of the Harem. Those were Leonowens' actual memoirs. Where are those? Like, I can't find them. I can't find the audiobooks of those original publications. I tried. And I'm really curious how things are portrayed from the woman who experienced it. Was she authentic, or how thick was her, Victorian lens when she viewed the King of Siam and the temple, right, the palace? It's in some ways like it's something we're still dealing with. I mean, we just had Midsommar, which was the same story, but with more bears and burning huts. Like, who are we to judge? Like, who judges culture, right? The one with the pen is judging culture. And in this case, it's Margaret Landon and it's Anna Leonowens. And they are judges of culture without the participation of the other side of the culture itself. And I think that's the constraint of this movie. That's the thing you have to get over to enjoy the hardwired kind of romantic stuff. Is that a fair assessment?
I think so. And I think that, it's interesting because there's definitely this type of story about a person going to another culture. And I mean, to a certain extent, this is really going to also fall into the same trappings that any story like Dances with Wolves or Avatar or any
Absolutely.
of those are a part of, where you have the white savior character who's coming in and helping these poor people, these, in this particular case, these, barbarians who live in Thailand, the film's words, not mine, by the way, but so they can, learn how to be appropriate and act like the British do and all of that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big element of this type of story. There is always going to be, in stories like this, even going to something like Driving Miss Daisy, where there is the personal story. And in this case, it's a little bit bigger because he's the king. He's ruling a country and he's trying to better his people and his family and everything like that. But you still have the personal story of these two characters trying to figure out how to get along, and in the process of bumping heads a number of times, finally learning to work together and help each other out. But then you also have the bigger picture, which, is probably more what we're talking about at this particular point, which is really about kind of the culture and how, as an audience, we're watching a film like this and we're seeing this particular kind of story of colonialism. Isn't it great that the British could come in and fix these people? And I feel like
that's exactly it, right? But and you know what? Why do I feel like I should have exactly the same problem with this movie that I do with Gone with the Wind, and yet Gone with the Wind makes me mad. This movie doesn't make me mad, and I think it's explicitly because Gone with the Wind is my culture. That's my history, and so there's like an arm's length distance that I have to keep reminding myself is this is doing a Gone with the Wind to other people, and Yush should probably feel strongly about that too. And so I don't know. I mean, are you hit with any of that?
I mean, I am a little bit, and I guess, in the scope of, I guess I'm not running into quite the Gone with the Wind-ness of this one. It definitely feels a little bit more, I don't know, I guess I'm not even sure Driving Miss Daisy is the right reference point, but I mean, maybe something like, I mean, it's hard to say because like even Dances with Wolves is less about him trying to teach them stuff. It's really, them trying to teach him things and
Yes.
everybody helping each other out. This one is really, I mean, she's a teacher. And so it's hard to say, well, she's going in to fix things. It's like, well, that's why they hired her. They brought her here very specifically to be a teacher and to help these kids. And it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, hey, I spent time in South America building latrines and giving immunizations when I was in high school. It's like, it's the sort of thing that, there's a part of you where you just want to, explore the world, learn other cultures, and help people out. And I can see both sides of the argument, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know, I guess in the scope of a teacher teaching, that's what they do, whether it's to her teaching a group of kids in a British classroom or an Indian classroom or over here in Thailand. She's doing her job.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. And I never get the sense that she has learned anything about Siamese culture that changes her in a substantive way beyond what she learns about herself through the relationship with the king, right? Everything she learns about Siamese culture is still filtered through the lens of barbarianism, right? It is foreign. Even when she puts English dresses on the many wives of the king, they don't have underwear, and she's shocked at not having anything to wear under those dresses. It's still, everything is filtered through shock. What she learns is the stuff that allows her to to thaw her icy heart, right? Like, she came not wanting to ever marry or fall in love again, and yet she develops a warmth for the king. And so while the king is learning so much, right, you can really, I get the sense that this is written in a way to demonstrate how inquisitive he is, right? He wants to learn a lot. The comedy comes when he interprets things strangely, right? He's a reader, right? He's a reader of many things. That, I think, is interesting. She is not portrayed that way, in my opinion.
No, I mean, he is very curious about the world. And yes, I mean, he is in a position of royalty. And so has certainly, I mean, it's funny because you do learn over the course of the film from his, I'm going to forget what.
Lee J. Cobb?
Yeah, what was Lee J. Cobb's position in the government there?
He was the prime minister.
The prime minister. But you learn from him that at one point, he had recruited King Mongkut from a monastery. He had been a monk, and then he came to be the king, apparently, I guess, when his father had died. It's funny. I kept laughing every time Mongkut was so much like the baby king, who gets everything he wants and was so demanding about everything. I'm like, this person was a monk. I would feel that he probably had learned a few lessons of humility while a monk that he probably didn't forget. And I imagine a lot of that is kind of the interpretation from Leon Owens and then Landon in the novel.
Doesn't it seem like the real conflict, the inner conflict in Mongkut, the story I wanted to see from him, was exactly that, his own struggle figuring out how to live with humility in the face of the trappings, the cultural trappings of royalty in Siam. He wasn't bred a king. Why was it so easy for him to demand people be on their hands and knees all the time?
Right. It's such and I guess it's I don't know if they said how long he had been a king by the time we stepped into the story.
I don't recall that.
Yeah, I can't quite remember. Yeah, I don't know. I guess in their culture, when men turn 20, they are supposed to become a monk for a while. And I'm just reading about Mongkut online right now. It says, the year that he went into the monastery, his father died. By tradition, he should have been crowned the next king, but they instead chose his older, more influential and experienced brother, who was the son of a concubine, rather than a queen. And so he stayed a monk for a while, and then eventually he did end up coming and becoming the king. But yeah, I think that's, I don't know. I would be so curious about I would love to watch a film about his story and his journey. That perspective, I think deserves to be told, and I think would make for an absolutely fascinating film. And so somebody out there, get to work.
let me ask you this. Do you have, when you finish watching this movie, with that question in mind, do you have any question as to the impact, like the verifiable impact that her relationship with the king had on Siam, now Thailand, writ large? What the film portrays and what we know about, like, do you feel like you were watching something that is at least rooted in truth?
I mean, yeah, I think so. I mean, I do get a sense that inevitably with a story like this, especially told at the time it was, you kind of have to walk into this knowing that there are going to be a lot of inaccuracies as far as the actual history. But I mean, I knew that she was a teacher. She taught his son. And I do think that I don't know. I guess I kind of bought into the fact that Chulalongkorn, his son, would end up kind of becoming, I don't want to necessarily say a better king, but, you know, having learned from her as a child and also from his father, who, as you said, a very inquisitive person who was passionate about learning, passionate about the world. And I think Chulalongkorn probably got a lot of that from his father too, and went on to become a ruler who brought the country forward. So I feel like watching a story like this, I'm seeing it through a very particular perspective, but I also feel like I buy it.
I would love to hear the non-dramatized, or like read the transcript of the scene that inspired the scene of Lady Thiang telling Anna that she failed. That scene in the movie was extraordinary. Like, it was an incredible gut punch to watch her talk about in such a stoic presentation how she failed because, you know, she didn't teach her son Chulalongkorn, the would-be king, the softness of the world, like the same sort of softness and inquisitiveness of the world that allows him to be a benevolent leader. And that sort of drives that transition into the final sort of sequences and his first act as governor of and king of Siam. And I thought that was incredibly powerful, but that doesn't come from nothing. Like, I would be that's the story I would love to see. Like, what was not dramatized about that?
Well, what I found frustrating about that, because I mean, Gail Sondergaard, who plays Lady Thiang, I thought did a great job, very kind of reserved performance and worked well in that role. But I wish that the story of the young prince, Chulalongkorn, that there was more meat to it in the story. Like, he has one scene where he asks Anna a question to learn a little bit more, and because she's running off to go do something else, I can't remember where she's going, but she kind of dismisses him and says, you know what, hey, let's talk about this later. It's not even a complete out and out dismissal. It's like, hey, I got to go do something. Let's talk about this later. And then suddenly we're given, oh, he's not coming to class anymore. Why is he being so distant? I wonder what's going on. Well, I hope everything's okay. And like, that's what we get. And then she talks to Lady Thiang, who tells her that, you know, she's always going to be remembered as failing her son. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I was given enough to actually buy into that whole perspective. But, and so that to me was the most frustrating part. I thought Sondergaard did great in the part, but I wish that element of the story was given a little more meat so that we could have really felt that when she said it, you know?
I think so too. And I couldn't help but think of, you know, movies like, you know, The Last Emperor, right? Like, just movies that show that development of childhood to royalty and the complexities that come into dealing with transitions of power, generational transitions of power, more effectively than this movie did. Because you're right, that entire storyline was in a microwave.
Yes, exactly. It was so rushed. I mean, it was really interesting, and that's what's frustrating about it. I wanted to see more, and like, there's even a friendship between Anna's young son Louis and Chulalongkorn that, I don't know, because they had a friendship that was always there, I never felt like there was an issue. It was such a strange thing to go, oh wow, okay, I didn't realize that we were having such a relationship breakup here between these characters. But yeah, so that was interesting.
Well, and yeah, how impactful the death of her son would be on Chulalongkorn. That it just happened so fast. So fast.
In the note of historical inaccuracies, apparently that is one of them. Her son does not die at this point. He actually outlived his mother.
Yeah, and she had 2 children.
Yeah,
that's another one.
Yeah, right.
We skipped over a number of key performances, and I feel like we should name drop some of them, like Rex Harrison as the king and Irene Dunne as Anna. You know, given everything that we've talked about and all of the cultural apologies that we make for the film that we need to make, how did these two hit you?
I loved the two of them in these roles. And I think, I only just watched The King and I recently, like in the last couple months, for the first time. I had never seen it before.
The musical? Yul Brynner?
Yeah, I had never seen it before. I know. I did not grow up with it like you. I only just watched it.
Sweet Jesus, Andy, what kind of hole did you live in Fort Fun? That's crazy.
I know. It's just one that I knew some of the songs. As funny as I was watching, I'm like, oh, this is where that song comes from. But for some reason, this one just never ended up crossing my path until I finally watched it. And I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. I mean, I think Deborah Kerr and Yul Brynner were good in the roles, but after watching this, I don't know, Rex Harrison, I really have a hard time with Rex Harrison in some of the films in the 60s that he does, but I loved him here. I mean, all the cultural appropriations aside, everything that he's doing in the role and kind of the pidgin English and everything, his curiosity and just the way that he played the king and going from like being the spoiled little brat king that he is to making these decisions. Like I found him just a joy to watch, and paired with Irene Dunne, who we just talked about in our last series in Love Affair. Like I loved the two of them as this pair, and they didn't ever have to become like this romantic love, relationship thing. It just, the fact that they developed this friendship and this respect for each other and this actual joy to be around each other. Like I really enjoyed them and their relationship.
Yeah, I think so too. And I actually liked all the naughty twists and broken promises. And the entire first act is her trolling him, making the kids learn psalms and songs about broken promises and the value of a home and a house, because that was the first promise he broke, was I promised you a house and I want you to live in the palace. You don't get a house. And so that little roundabout, like demonstrating the arc of their relationship by way of her using everything that was his against him, I thought was really fantastic. And talk about breaking down that emotional wall between the two of them. I thought it was just really funny. So I can see, and some of the critique that I've read is that inconsistency in his character is put on the performance, and I don't think that's fair. I really think it's written that way. Like, it feels written to be twisted inside of itself and mercurial and inconsistent. Like, that's the idea. I don't think any of that is Rex Harrison's doing. I think he performed what was on the page, and to me, he did it well. I like you, I don't love the pidgin English, but I thought that relationship that they developed was really great. I love how he keeps calling her in the middle of the night for things like, why can't we send elephants to Lincoln? It was so good.
Yeah, he was fantastic.
The whole idea of putting on a piece of paper the things about which you are particularly brilliant and handing it to your wife or assistant and say, if the conversation dolls bring up one of these things, because I really can rock these topics. That's like alpha gamesmanship. We should take that away from this movie, you and I.
I've been doing that with my wife for years. Here, honey. These are the things you can bring up if there's a lull in the conversation.
Chapter 1, pickleball. Okay. Yeah, so I was really great.
Now, we talked about Gail Sondergaard as Lady Tiang. We mentioned Lee J. Cobb as the Prime Minister. How did he work for you?
Not great, Andy.
That was a rough one, wasn't it?
That's a rough one all up and down the film. And the fact that it starts at the pier and a shirtless, voiceless Lee J. Cobb shows up and stands in front of her. Like, there is no way this is going to go right. And so I think from there, like, again, with today's eyes, watching this movie, that's where the redemption has to start, because that is the low point when he shows up covered in paint and speaks Thai in his, whatever the variant of the language was at the time, in his accent with his face does not play. I never adjusted to Lee J. Cobb in this movie.
He always sounds like a guy from New York. He never,
for sure. Yep.
He never sounds like a person who is from Asia at all. Even I would have taken just doing it in a British accent, like anything, just so he didn't sound like Lee J. Cobb.
Yeah.
Like I was just like, he goes from here to the docks working with his brother on the waterfront. Like it was like way too close in just like that same tone. So, and I love Lee J. Cobb. Like he's a fantastic actor who's been in a ton of great stuff, most of which we haven't talked about on the show. I'm just looking through his filmography. I think is the only thing we've talked about that he's done Coogan's Bluff, which is like, I mean, he's not even like, a big part in that. Oh, of course, The Exorcist. And so that's probably the biggest thing that we've talked about with him. But, he's just, he's such a great actor. And it's just a shame that he ended up stuck in this part that just doesn't fit him at all.
Yeah, it doesn't play. Not in a way that I think Rex Harrison can fake it enough so that we can get into the movie. Lee J. Cobb can't. He's too Lee J. Cobb. He's too big.
Yeah.
And I think there were some of the kids, right? Like Prince Chulalongkorn was Tito Ronaldo.
That's when he's older.
When he's older, right. Yeah. And I think I was able to buy him in spite of a lot of the kids, I think I should say, a lot of the kids did not, they had their accents that did not, I think, transfer well. But I was able to buy them because they, the kids are blank slates, right? As long as you're going to paint people, kids are easy canvases. You can make them look the part pretty quick. And I think that, a lot of the same could be said of the wives. There were many, many wives. Our principal wives, we had Lady Thiang, obviously, and Tuptim was a controversial wife. And I felt like Linda Darnell and Gail Sondergaard were able stand-ins for the movie that we got.
What did you think about Tuptim's story in this? It's done differently in The King and I,
for sure,
which is definitely more. I feel like, well, I mean, it's a musical, so they're not going to like burn someone at the stake in the musical necessarily. But I felt like her character seemed a little more. Oh, I'm just so in love with this man, and like lost and forlorn. And what I loved about Linda Darnell as Tuptim here, which is probably also just the way that she's written here, but she really seemed antagonistic. Like she was a great foil for Anna for that early part of the film. Like she just was so negative about everything. And I loved the scene where she's asking her questions about her conversation with King. She's showing him that amazing jewel in that little case, only to use that as a way to find out that Anna is the one who the king was listening to. And she's like, if I don't have the king's ear, what good am I? And then she shatters it. Like, I found that to be a really fascinating relationship, and watching kind of that journey of Tuptim all the way through finally getting burned at the stake with the man she had formerly been betrothed to, who had gone into the monastery himself, but then they burned them because they thought that they had gotten back together. It was like, I found that more of a satisfying element of the story than, and I'm trying to remember, how does that end in The King and I? Do you recall? It's not anything like that.
It is ambiguous. It's totally ambiguous. You don't know what happens to her, which is in contrast to, and I was reading up on this because I couldn't figure out, I can't find where, I think I read it, that, I mean, she was killed in the real story. She was burned here and beheaded in the 1999 version publicly. But how was she killed in real life? What was the ceremonial killing in real life? And I can't find that right now. But I thought that was really interesting. In the musical, to your point, it is ambiguous and masked in song.
Right. Fittingly, I suppose.
Yeah.
Why it works better here is because I suppose you could argue it's used as a device to keep King Mongkut for the white audiences watching the movie to show he still is trying to learn the lessons that he needs to learn from the good white lady. And he's not quite there yet. To that end, it's rough, but I think there is something more to it in the fact that there is this element in this person who thinks that she is in a position to kind of like tell a leader of a country what to do in the scope of how they deal with the law and the kind of the traditions within the country, only to realize, like, that's a big realization point for her to go, oh, I guess I don't necessarily, I'm not quite the world leader that I am thinking I am at this point.
Yeah. Well, and okay, so 2 points. One, just to clarify, I found it. Tuptim's torture and execution by burning at the stake is disputed by great-granddaughter of the king, who also claims to be Tuptim's granddaughter, who says that they never burned people in Siam at that time. That wasn't the kind of thing that they did. But they don't dispute the beheading, so there's a chance. The other thing that I think is interesting, to your point specifically, this movie, and part of the sort of gestalt of this movie is having characters that are unafraid to speak truth to power. And there are a lot of these iconic characters that come in and affect change by way of their relationship behind the scenes, right? I mean, all the way through, what is it, Kevin Spacey's White House thing, right? That's an entire show about people speaking truth to power and the backsides and what kind of things, how complicated those relationships can be. And I think those are really interesting. And this movie is sort of a purist take on like what that romantic, relationship can unlock in terms of your ability to reflect for a state leader. Hey, you're doing it wrong. Do it better.
Yeah.
That's an interesting kind of lens to look at this movie through.
Yeah. And it also just shows in the scope of being human, how hard that is to do sometimes. Like when someone tells you to do something better, there is that sense of pride that you sometimes just can't let go of. And, you just say, no, I'm going to do it my way because this is the right way. Even though in your heart, you're starting to like feel like you're understanding it, but you just can't step away from that. And that is, I think, an interesting element with Mongkut and Rex Harrison's portrayal, because I kind of read that with him. Like he is really trying to get past some of these things, but there are times where he just can't let his pride as the king get injured, and he goes forward anyway and making decisions that are, I think he acknowledges, are probably for the worst, but he's doing it anyway.
For sure.
Yeah.
What'd you think of the look?
It's interesting. John Cromwell directed this. I don't think we've talked about anything of his before. He was directing all through the late 20s largely into the 50s when he kind of got caught up in the House Un-American Activities Committee and pretty much had his directing career kind of shut down, even though at the time it started, he ended up at RKO. And I think it was about the same time that Howard Hughes bought RKO, who was very anti-communist. And they kind of just pushed Cromwell into the corner to direct a bunch of crap that they, didn't want to have to deal with. And so he ended up kind of at the end of his career, not doing as much. But my knowledge of him only comes from probably a few of the film noirs that I had seen that he had directed. And so I don't have a good sense of Cromwell as a director and what he's bringing to the table. As far as the look for this particular story, the production design is fantastic. The cinematography, Arthur C. Miller was the cinematographer. And I gotta say, I didn't think anything special of it. I thought it was fine. I thought it did its job, but nothing stood out to me as, oh, this should win an Oscar for Best Black and White Cinematography, which it did. I don't know. What did you think of?
Yeah. No, I'm right with you. It just everything felt staged. Everything felt really staged. There were beautiful sets. It looked good, but it didn't feel like it was this earth-shattering vision of creativity behind the camera. I didn't walk away transformed.
Yeah, which I felt like, I don't know, I guess I was just really surprised when I was looking at the awards, for the next part of our show. And I was just like, wow, really? Cinematography?
Yeah.
Huh, okay.
Yep, that's not one I would have said. What did it win for though? It won 2, right? The one of them was art design, I think.
Yeah, it won cinematography and then art direction, interior decoration, black and white. So, which definitely makes sense because I mean it was gorgeous, and I think it's one of those things. I mean, building a set for kind of a palace in another part of the world, I suppose there's an easy element to making it just look cool and beautiful, and so I suppose that they had an easy job kind of coming up with really interesting sets for it. But I mean, I generally enjoyed that part of the film.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I enjoyed the music.
Yeah.
I think some of it was a bit on the nose, but I did love the score. I thought it was lovely.
Yeah, this is a Bernard Herrmann score that he did for this that, I don't know, as I was listening, I kept humming it afterward. And I'm like, I did find it quite captivating. I enjoyed the themes and everything. But at the same time, I'm like, is this the music of the era that kind of set the stereotyping of the Asian kind of chords that you would get when you would portray like an instant part of the world, like, oh, I heard that chord, now I know I'm in Asia.
Yep.
Like some of the chords in this, I'm like, and so I was wondering, I'm like, I wonder if this is where that came from,
Right. They just sort of landed on this. It did well. We might as well just turn out a bunch of Asian sounding scores for anything shot on the set that exists on the other side of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It is interesting to me, though, just on reflection, right? After watching this movie, I liked the movie, right? I enjoyed my time with the movie. To our question at the very beginning, I don't think we've answered the question, why has it transfixed audiences for so many years across so many variations, which we'll talk about in a bit. But there are a lot of versions of this in a lot of different flavors, and I don't understand that necessarily.
Well, I mean, do you suppose, I mean, obviously there is a sense of the, just the draw, the connection with somebody. And I suppose even though it's not a love story, there is this romantic kind of connection between the two that just feels like, I suppose this is maybe why I brought up Driving Miss Daisy earlier in the film. It's not a romantic story, but it is a story of a developing friendship that really becomes something that kind of transcends cultures and everything. Like, I really enjoy the way that relationship develops between these two people. And also, I suppose there is a little hint that audiences probably love with a story like this of a common person who ends up becoming the ear to royalty and, is somebody who is able to kind of like, affect change within a country. And I suppose there is this interesting draw that people have to a story like that. Like, oh, what would, I would love to be living in the royal palace and I get to tell the king what to do and they listen to me. Like, I think that there's an element of that also draws people to kind of the romance of this story. It's the story of being thrust into this big world,
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This is like, there's another version of this story of which, like, Watergate's Deep Throat was a big fan. Like, I got to see all the secrets, and now I'm going to tell them in a parking garage.
Yeah, right. Actually, now that you went to the U.S. side of things, but it's like Dave. It's like a common person who suddenly is oh, wow, I get to play president now. Wow, look what I get to do. Yeah.
Yep. I guess that's it.
Yeah.
All right. I got nothing else. You got anything else?
That is it. So we will be right back. But first, our credits.
The Next Reel is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson, music by Hans Johnson, Oriel Novella, and Eli Kaplan. Andy usually finds all the stats for the awards and numbers at the-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. All right, so I teased other adaptations, Andy. They keep making this thing over and over and over again.
Oh, yeah, and still nobody has made the version from the book by those Thai scholars who took kind of the story from Mongkut's perspective, which I am so much more curious about now.
They've never even made it in Thailand. That'd be interesting. Yeah. Is there a Thai film?
Right. Yeah, I would love that. This was the first adaptation of this, and then followed by The King and I, the musical, the stage musical, and which was, of course, then shortly thereafter, followed by the film musical. They did make a TV series of this in the early 70s, but I guess there had been a number of lawsuits by Leon Owen's family because of just a lot of, as they said, inaccurate and mutilated portrayals of her literary property. It was an unsuccessful lawsuit, but I don't think the show lasted more than, looks like, 13 episodes. Then 1999 comes along, and there were two versions of the film that year. Of course, there was the Anna and the King Andy Tennant version with Jodie Foster and Chow Yun-fat, but there was also the King and I animated musical, which I remember this coming out earlier in the year before the other one. It was an adaptation specifically of the musical. It had a fairly decent cast. Morgan Creek and Warner Brothers Animation put it out, and I think it was the thing that killed Warner Brothers Animation at the time because it was such a complete flop. Nobody wanted to see it. Everybody thought it was a complete disaster, and yeah, it's funny when they crank something out like that just nobody wants to see.
I mean, it looks like the poster.
Oh, yeah,
is as derivative as they get. Like, it looks like another another film.
Yeah, it looks like the rip-off animated films that would always come out like when another film was coming out. Like it doesn't look like something that Warner Brothers would be putting out.
No, for sure. I wonder if they beheaded Tup Tim in that version. Wonder how that plays in animation.
Yeah, what happened to Tup Tim? Yeah, let me see if I can find Tup Tim. The king threatens to whip her to death, but he finds that he can't do it. She and Chulalongkorn, she's in love with Chulalongkorn in that particular version.
Oh.
And they escape on elephants with Lewis.
Oh, and look at this. Okay, here's another one. The very end, it's the end where the king doesn't die.
He lets his son marry Tup Tim at the end of the story and become king and queen.
Yeah.
But the king is injured, but he does heal, and then he's able to
finally give her a house.
Dance with Anna. He's able to dance with Anna in her house outside of the palace. Oh my gosh. Wow. Why have we not covered that movie?
Right. That's going to be in our Anna and the King mega series where we do all the films of Anna and Siam and King Mongkut.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
All right.
Andy, how did it do at award season? That's why we're here, after all.
That is why we're here. That's right. We never even mentioned, but this film is kicking off our 1947 Academy Award nominees for Best Writing Screenplay, which is adapted screenplay. They just weren't calling it at the time. It was nominated for 5 awards, including that, which it lost to Best Years of Our Lives. It was nominated, we talked about the music. It was nominated for Best Music, Scoring of a Dramatic or Comedy Picture, but also lost to the Best Years of Our Lives. Gail Sondergaard was nominated for her quiet performance as Lady Tiong, but lost to Anne Baxter in The Razor's Edge. And as we said, it won Best Cinematography, Black and White, and Best Art Direction, Interior Decoration, Black and White. At the New York Film Critics Circle Awards, Rex Harrison was nominated for Best Actor, but lost to Laurence Olivier in Henry V. National Board of Review, it was in their top 10 films of the year. At the Cannes Film Festival, it was nominated for the Grand Prize feature film, but lost to, tons of films. 11 films win that award at the time. And so, it had its place in the award circles, but it didn't take any away other than those few.
I mean, that doesn't necessarily surprise me too much. I mean, especially when you look at the movies it was up against. And Rex Harrison against Laurence Olivier. We just talked about him.
I found myself a little surprised, though, that it was nominated for Best Writing Screenplay. Kicking off this series, I think that there are some better picks of the year, which we'll talk about when we get to the end of this series.
For sure. Have you finished all the movies that were released in 1946 for your preparation for this? Just
slowly working on them. I finally said, you know what? I need to whittle my list down to just films that were adapted so I can be more focused. And then I realized 97% of the films on my list were adaptations. I'm like, well, that didn't help much.
Okay.
I think I cut 3 films off.
How did it do at the box office?
Well, jumping ahead 7 years from our last series, I was hoping to find a bit more information. Unfortunately, there just wasn't much for this film. I could find nothing regarding the budget for this. I did find that it opened June 20th, 1946, and it did go on to earn $3.5 million domestically, or $57.1 million in today's dollars. Without the budget, though, I just don't know how well it did, alas.
All right. That's it. That's the Anna and the King. And now I don't know. I don't even know. I do want to go listen to that soundtrack real hard.
Would you put this on over The King and I? I know King and I you've kind of grown up with. Where do you stand between these two?
Oh, absolutely not. No, because I don't think the story, I mean, I enjoyed the movie, but I just, I don't enjoy the specific story enough without the addition of the music. The music adds the next thing, the next layer of interest to me. And I feel like it is just because I grew up with it. It's like a complete thing for me, right? Everything else, this felt like until they start singing, this movie isn't finished. And so the movie never quite ended.
I can see that for sure. I, as somebody who's never seen The King and I until, as I said just a few months ago, I may prefer this over The King and I. It's just Lee J. Cobb, some of the brownface, some of that stuff is tough to get past. But otherwise, I really enjoyed the heart of this story. So,
yeah. Okay.
Well, there it is. Well, we'll be right back for our ratings. But first, here is the trailer for next week's movie, William Wyler's The Best Years of Our Lives.
These are the great personalities who bring a memorable experience to glowing life. Samuel Goldwyn's masterpiece. The screenplay was written by Robert E. Sherwood, Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright of Petrified Forest and Idiot's Delight. From this, William Wyler, who won the Academy Award for his direction of Mrs. Miniver, wove a pattern of motion picture magic, with Myrna Loy and Frederick March living through the heartwarming second bloom of love. Dana Andrews and Teresa Wright feeling the breathtaking thrill of love at first sight. Hoagie Carmichael spreading his own brand of stardust. All of them together, giving all of us the best years of our lives.
It is hard to believe we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a lot of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
The originals page at thenextreel.com/originals links to the source material for all of our adapted film discussions. Purchasing through our links supports the show.
In Season 13, we explore various awards categories and the films nominated in them.
We wrapped up our 1940 Best Picture series with adaptations of Mice and Men from John Steinbeck and Wuthering Heights from Emily Bronte's novel, not to mention the play Dark Victory by George Brewer Jr. and Bertram Bloch.
The 1947 Academy Award adapted screenplay series featured Anna and the King of Siam, based on Margaret Langdon's book, plus The Best Years of Our Lives, Brief Encounter, and The Killers.
The 1952 cinematography nominees included Death of a Salesman and A Streetcar Named Desire, A Place in the Sun, based on both a play and a book, and Strangers on a Train, based on Patricia Highsmith's first novel.
So many great movies based on books and plays, like Beckett, The Pumpkin Eater,
A Boy and His Dog, Rollerball,
The Princess Bride, Congo, The Scarlet Letter,
Jackie Brown, The Deep End, The Gray, The Woman in Black,
and Top Gun Maverick, which I'm very much looking forward to revisiting.
Get the source books at thenextreel.com/originals. Start
your next read or reread from the movies we've covered. Visit thenextreel.com/originals today. All right, Andy, Letterboxd. We head over and look at all of our great stuff over at the letterboxd.com/thenextreel. That's our Letterboxd HQ page. You can see all of the show reviews and ratings and everything like that. What are you going to do personally, Soda Creek Film?
I feel like I enjoyed this enough to give it 3 stars and a heart. I think that's where I'm going to sit with it, which actually is where I also gave the musical version. I think that this is just where that story sits for me.
I don't actually think I have the musical version rated, but I do. I'm 3 stars and a heart for this one too. It's middle of the road with a little plus. I enjoyed it, and but for me the musical is probably a 4-star.
Oh, okay. A lot of good songs.
Yeah, a lot of good songs.
All right. Remember, don't forget to visit thenextreel.com/letterbox to get your Patron or Pro membership. It works for renewals as well. So what did you think about Anna and the King of Siam? We would love to hear your thoughts. Hop into the Show Talk channel over in our Discord community, where we will be talking about the movie this week.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Letterboxd giveth, Andrew.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
Okay, I've got a 2-star. You've got a 4-star. You want to go up or down?
Mine gives us a little meat to talk about. So maybe we start with mine if yours is
okay.
less serious.
Mine's meaty too. I think I've got some meat too. But I yield the floor to the gentleman from Arizona.
This is an interesting one. I want to go look at their review on their website. It is a 4-star by Flickers in Time, who says, I can't imagine the filmmakers realized just what an effective critique of colonialism they were making. Solid, entertaining telling of Anna Leon Owen's fictionalization of her own life.
Huh.
Effective critique of colonialism. Did I miss that?
Is that because it... Did I see that same movie?
Well, I'm curious, like, is it possible to walk away from this film reading it that way? And I guess I didn't read it that way, but I'm very curious now. I want to go look at their website now to see what they had to say. But flickersintime.com, I guess they have a movie review. I'm going to have to go look at it, but I don't know.
That's really interesting. And I guess in the context of the stuff that she was doing still got Tuptim killed, like just in the context of the colonial infection didn't work? Is that what they were saying?
In the wake of the devastation following World War II, Americans are questioning the whole idea of empire. The film reflects this in Anna's many speeches about individual freedom, rule of law, and national independence. At the same time, however, the story contains all the worst aspects of colonialism. Anna has picked up the white man's burden of civilizing the ignorant and showing them the light. She makes little to no effort understanding the Thais' ancient culture or beliefs.
That's a really good question. I think we were getting there when we talked about how offended she's constantly kind of exuding every time something else hits her that isn't English. Like that makes a lot of sense. But her speeches, we didn't mention that at all. And her speeches about the importance of law and the importance of law to the king specifically, so that law applies to everyone, is specifically anti-colonial, right? Which marches around the world saying that our laws are the laws, and the laws don't apply to us; they apply to those under our rule.
Right.
That's actually a really interesting take.
It is an interesting take. I might need to read that full article and then think about the movie a little bit more. Maybe it'll change some of my perspective of it. But
post that in the show talk. I'd like to read that article too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mine comes from Claudio Alves. This is a 2-star review and says the Margaret Landon novel was such a success in America that it was only a matter of time before Hollywood turned it into a movie. 20th Century Fox producers Daryl Zanuck supposedly marveled at the comedic possibilities of the story, the clash of cultures tempered by personal drama, tenderness, and conflict. Knowing Zanuck's opinion of the novel certainly helps explain the strange tonalities of 1946's Anne and the King of Siam. While I appreciate the avoidance of romantic undertones, there is something unsettling about the jesting attitude that consumes a lot of this flick. I totally get that. I get that perspective because it has put a jesting, comedic transparency layer on top of stuff that's pretty darn serious.
Yeah, although, and this might be something with that we could say regarding John Cromwell. Mm-hmm. I felt like it never actually went as far as it could have with some of that stuff. Like it felt
never
like
lampooned any of this.
And it felt like they could have really been turning this into a much more of a comedic take on all of this. And I guess I can't remember exactly with The King and I to compare, but I felt like it's there, but I do feel like that Cromwell managed it in a way where it didn't ever feel too much to me personally.
Yeah. Agreed. Okay, that's all I got.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody, and thank you, Letterboxd.